right, let's go ahead and get this kicked off. I hope everyone is doing well during these times, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us this morning as we discuss thinking beyond DR and data protection by using Zerto to reduce operational overhead. Specifically, we'll be taking a look at ways Zerto can help you in daily operations related to patch testing and security testing. Before we get started though, a couple of housekeeping items. If there are any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A panel and we'll try to get those answered as they're coming in. And then there will also be a short Q&A at the end of the presentation, so you'll also get a chance to ask a live question if you choose to at that time. Right, so my name is Gene Torres and I will be your master disaster for the next 45 minutes. I'm a solutions architect at Zerto and I've been with them for about 3 years, 5, 6-ish years if you consider my usage and experience as a customer. My role is to provide technical strategy-based representation for the field sales team in the Western United States. As part of providing that technical strategy for customers, to me, it's about really understanding how we can bring value and enable capabilities of Zerto beyond just DR. And today I have the privilege of being able to share how some of that additional value can be realized through something you may already be doing, which is continuously protecting your virtual workloads with Zerto. Joining me to help me out today with the questions is Matt Bernhardt. He's one of our solutions engineers out of Portland or Southern Washington and Vancouver. And he covers Oregon, Idaho, half of Washington, Utah. Did I miss anything, Matt?
Nope, you got me, thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, so while many of you may be familiar with Zerto, some of you may be seeing this for the first time, so I'd like to first provide a quick overview of the platform before we get into the operational use cases. So the Zerto IT Resilience Platform is a software-only solution and is based on a foundation of continuous data protection. And with that, we converge the functions of disaster recovery, operational recovery, long-term retention, hybrid or multi-cloud mobility, and operational services. Orchestration and automation are built into the platform, so you can automate manual processes and plan ahead when it comes to aligning resources. So you know what to expect in the event of a disruption. You're able to test often and become more repeatable in recovery operations for both planned or unplanned disruptions to your business. Analytics and control is also a part of our solution with out-of-the-box dashboards and reports. We figure if we're already protecting the data and providing visibility into your resource availability and usage in your environment, why not complete visibility across multi-site, multi-cloud environments so we can ensure that the SLAs of your business are met. And if that wasn't enough, being software only and continuous, the platform enables your strategy to become storage and hardware or even cloud agnostic for that matter, eliminating the need to maintain hardware plugins, guest agents, and complex compatibility matrices to make it all work together. So what we're going to focus on today is around operational services and or that you can provide via Zerto, primarily around the patch and security testing areas. Now, we all know that IT operations is a necessity that is critical to running your organization's solutions. But in order to be successful, we have several imperatives, which you can see here. The first one is going to be that IT operations run solutions. As we introduce new solutions to production, we don't just stop there. These solutions begin a life cycle when they're implemented. Some short, some long, some become the core of how the business operates, transforms, and aligns to the changing market and customers' expectations. Next, operational teams manage infrastructure. The infrastructure that creates the environment for those solutions that you build or purchase needs to be managed. Some, if not all, of this infrastructure also has a life cycle as well as their own SLAs. We also need to understand the configuration of the solutions we deploy and run. Here we include things like documentation, standard practices, knowing application interdependencies and things like that. Having this knowledge and testing what we know brings visibility into the impact that may result from change. Traditional strategies are centered around manual maintenance of configuration or dependency metadata, which can be risky and expensive proposition at best. In the case of IP, tracking IPs via spreadsheet. Agile strategies focus on delivering or deriving or generating the required metadata using modern solutions or from executable test specifications. Throughout this life cycle, we know nothing stands still, especially when it comes to technology and transformation. Evolving your IT infrastructure over time means upgrading databases, operating systems, hardware components, etc. So depending on the complexity of your infrastructure and your applications, this can be a risky endeavor, hence the need to identify the potential impact of any change before making it.
Gene, can't hear you if you're talking.
Okay, sorry about that. So how can Zerto help? Or maybe a better question is, how can you introduce Zerto to IT operations, and just where does it fit in that framework? First place is going to be under running solutions. So to run solutions, we must design, plan, implement, configure, test, tune, and protect. Zerto helps here with testing and protection, and ultimately recovery. Once Zerto is protecting an application, you don't need to worry about backup windows or performance impact, or even snapshots or managing guest agents. When it comes to managing infrastructure, you can gain visibility into your environment and resources where Zerto is installed. You can identify configurations of your workloads, storage capacity, network throughput and usage, and then also take advantage of the Zerto Planner to identify requirements for future purposes, for example, an on-premises data center expansion or building out a DR data center, or even adopting the cloud and trying to discover what requirements you have for your workloads. So you need to also manage the underlying hypervisor environment. And part of Zerto's simplicity includes integration of things like vMotion, storage vMotion, vSphere maintenance mode operations, just so you can ensure you don't lose any functionality in your environment as you're operating. And then when it comes to evolving IT infrastructure, you can use Zerto to identify the impact of that evolution, evaluate solutions, and validate success before committing to it. You can apply application, security patches, or OS updates in a true test environment to validate success and account for any change that may cause disruption or an unsuccessful software update or rollout. All right, so move from old to new storage compute platforms or data centers, adopt a hybrid cloud approach, and validate everything will work before committing. This should go without saying, since Zerto is, after all, an IT resilience platform, we've got roots in quick disaster recovery, but in addition to actual DR events, use Zerto as part of your random disaster problem simulations, as with things like chaos engineering. You can automate scheduled failover tests when you plan for any type of outage to your application, and gain the confidence of repeatability through that routine testing and reporting of those results. And finally, with governing IT operations, you can monitor and measure your SLAs, your RPOs, your protection over time, to ensure that you're aligning your strategy to the business and their objectives. Now let's start thinking out of the box and see how Zerto can help you bring efficiency to IT operations. And specifically, we'll start here with patch testing. So why do we patch software, firmware, and operating systems? Do we do it for fun? I doubt it. Do you know anyone who enjoys testing and implementing routine patches and security updates? I don't. The process takes time and is a lot of work, especially when we're talking about the scale of today's enterprise. It's required, though, to remain resilient and ensure proper operations of systems and services. What about vulnerabilities or exploits? These are discovered all the time, and a lot of times the quote-unquote fixes may just get implemented without understanding the ramifications of doing so, which can lead to new problems. Again, it still needs to be done to ensure that resilience and to comply with security requirements. Bugs are also often discovered in products, whether hardware or software, that may be crucial to their operation. Validating these patches or these updates to resolve those issues provides you with visibility and trust in knowing that these changes will not negatively impact production. I remember when a routine patch took down hundreds of virtual workloads, which then took hours to recover from through manual uninstallation of that specific patch. During that time, it was all hands on deck, multiple teams working together to identify and remediate, when we could have tested them much sooner and gotten results against a copy of actual production systems in a non-disruptive manner. And typically, there may be differing stances on whether or not to patch, depending on criticality or past experience with failures, or a lack of an efficient way to properly vet out these patches before going into production with them. Some organizations have multiple non-production tiers to test against, and some don't. Where Zerto comes in at this point is we can help alleviate a lot of the anxiety and guesswork around patching those workloads. When we're talking about patch testing with Zerto, first and foremost, you can actually skip the 2 or 3 environments if you do have them and test directly against production applications and services. Get your results, start there, and then with the lower criticality or urgency, patch the lower environments to catch them up to production with a lot less risk to the business. I know this can sound daunting or even backwards, but if you think about it, if you put a copy of production into a sandbox and apply your patches there, get your results, it almost guarantees that those results are, since they're based on production configurations, that you're going to be successful, and you're not testing out of sync or out of date, or even completely different copies of those systems that were created, maybe years or months ago. And those environments we know are going to be prone to a lot of unmanaged change. So this can be done using Zerto's failover test operation in concert with a purposely built sandbox network to ensure no impact to production. And while you're getting your results, you can do your validation, and all this is taking place, no one else is the wiser. If you have systems that are really out of compliance, for example, you have that application that hasn't been patched in a year because the last time it was patched or updated, it caused an outage. Now you can see what it takes to get them compliant, and through that testing, you can find the path of least resistance to get these systems up to speed and reduce that attack surface for your application. Finally, stop using snapshots as a failsafe, only to find out that they're still sitting around next month or even longer. Instead of creating those snapshots with all of your VMs, which can be could cause performance or availability problems, and then think about at scale all the tasks that you have to do to take those snapshots, leverage Zerto's tag checkpoint operation that just flags a point in time in our journal for you to roll back to if needed. If you have multiple virtual machines in that application or that virtual protection group, all you have to do is run that operation once, and it'll tag for the VMs all across the board to that specific moment in time. If you don't need that flag checkpoint later in the future, no harm done. Due to the nature of how our journal is a first in, first out queue, that checkpoint will naturally just age out of the journal all on its own. So no cleanup for on your behalf whatsoever. Right, so how do you do it? Well, you're halfway there, or you could be halfway there, depending if you're already an existing Zerto customer. If you're already replicating those workloads and tracking your journal in the recovery site, therefore, you don't need any additional changes done to Zerto, right? So all you need to do when you're ready to test is select the virtual protection group containing your application and click the Failover Test button. Within minutes, a read-only copy of those workloads will be instantiated in the recovery site and aligned to that sandbox environment. Now you can deploy those patches and test. Even in read-only, your workloads can be written to, as Zerto leverages a scratch disk with a default of 150 gigs per VM to allow for changes. In addition to having a copy of production to test with, Zerto will maintain replication and checkpoint creation, so you don't have to go unprotected during your testing phases. If something doesn't work, find out what it is, remove it, stop the test, then restart the test with the change and get your results. So in comparison to traditional ways of testing patches, this method can greatly reduce the amount of effort and people involved. Now that's great, but how am I supposed to patch the systems in this isolated bubble network or sandbox? There are a few options, and the first is to create some infrastructure resources within your isolated network. or sandbox, such as a software distribution point where the updates live and can be pulled from during the test. This distribution point will need to be configured to receive bundles, which can be done, as I've seen some solutions like SCCM work across highly secured environments. When you use Zerto, you can also employ the use of pre or post recovery scripts. And in this case, you can leverage a post recovery script that installs the required patches upon the recovery. Another option here would be to precede the updates to the VMs in question, then run a failover test with a post recovery script to deploy the patches on boot, or even kick them off from a jump box. This capability gives you the creative freedom to find the best solution quickly and non-impactfully, and as a bonus, it's repeatable. So you really can be creative. You can leverage any additional tools that you have for this solution to test your patches. You don't have to have anything specific, just what you use today. The next option, which could be a little trickier, is to enable your admin console to access that isolated network to apply those patches so you can push them into that network after the systems are brought up in test. This can be challenging, especially if you're not changing your IP addresses, because you want to make sure that there are no conflicts on your network. So this access can be controlled by your network and/or security team. So it will need to involve their assistance. This way you can validate everything else works before even applying the patches. Now, with all that information just given, what value can you gain from it? First of all, now you can become confident in terms of what the impact is on patching those systems, how long it will take, what to expect, and how to quickly roll it back. You're not at risk of breaking production by testing against non-compliant systems first. You've been able to gauge success and failure of any or all patches faster than ever. That year-old backlog you've been anxious about, you've just figured out the best course of action to becoming compliant and have documentation to prove it. You can reduce your patch implementation cycle from a month or more down to a couple of weeks or less, since you now can skip less critical and out of sync environments to get results when in reality, the systems may never have been identical to start with. One of our customers even found a way to patch the remote offices in record time using Zerto to mobilize applications for host patching. In this case, 2 hosts, no shared storage, VMs running on one host. The hosts need to be updated. Using Zerto, they can replicate, and it's kind of like the baking show ahead of time. Data's already on the second host, ready to go. You fire off a failover, bring them up, take your other host down for maintenance, do the work, and then repeat the process in the opposite direction. So now no one has any excuse not to patch due to lack of visibility or infrastructure even, therefore reducing that risk to vulnerabilities and known issues. Finally, save your precious production grade storage capacity and performance by eliminating the need to use snapshots for patching activities, period. Right, so say we've taken the steps to integrate Zerto into our patch testing operations. How can this help us in the case of security testing? So why is security testing important? Security testing is designed to bring visibility into any vulnerabilities, threats, or risks due to misconfigurations in an application so malicious attacks can be prevented. That said, testing should be performed proactively on a frequent basis, that is more than once a year. According to research done by SYNAC in December of 2019, I quote, security is becoming part of an organization's normal everyday routine rather than an annual event that is focused only on compliance. Furthermore, as the number of cyber incidents continues to increase, it will be imperative for decision makers to implement security testing solutions on a continuous basis with anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 hours of testing per year. Again, according to SYNAC. When we're talking about compliance or industry-based regulations and penalties, frequent testing or security testing becomes more important. And here are some examples of why this should be important. A PCI DSS violation, if found out of compliance, fines can be as high as $100,000 per month until compliance is met. In the healthcare industry, a HIPAA violation can bring penalties of up to $50,000 per violation. In utility industries, and I've actually worked in one of them for a period of time, they're regulated by multiple bodies, right? One of them is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. as they call in the industry. Incidents that are a result of being out of compliance with regulations can reach as high as $1 million per day. So ultimately, incidents can result in a loss of reputation and or business, or put you out of business altogether. So there's a very real consequence when it comes to security of systems and data, which is why it is of utmost importance to perform security testing as frequently as possible, and of course, in a non-disruptive manner. Additionally, gain some insight and be able to provide an accurate and comprehensive picture of your security posture, which is going to make your C-level suites very happy. All right, so taking a look at a two-site Zerto solution, we can see that it's basically the same topology as a sandbox patch testing environment. But what's so special about a sandbox for security purposes? From a cybersecurity perspective and definition, a sandbox is basically an isolated environment on a network that mimics end-user operating environments. So in using a sandbox for security testing, security teams are not only able to scan for vulnerabilities and validate compliance, this also enables them to safely execute malicious code in an isolated and non-disruptive environment. And one of the nicer things about performing security testing this way is that the environment can be stood up over and over again very quickly to test for additional security concerns or cases. And when you're done, all you need to do is hit that failover or stop button on the failover test, and Zerto will just discard everything that's been done. So think of it as whatever happens in the sandbox stays in the sandbox. From within this environment, the IT security organization can effectively detonate or execute code and observe that behavior and output activity. This method of testing can provide more visibility versus traditional ways of scanning, which is based on signature detection, and that's actually created after something has already been identified outside in the wild or outside of your organization. The requirements are very similar to that of our patch testing use case, right? An isolated, non-routable network, which will segregate systems off into that sandbox. And then you can leverage it for anything that requires testing where you want to use production data and systems to have a really clear picture and get production worthy results. So once you've performed several manual tests, can we automate it? Yes. So once you've performed all those tests and you understand the process and the steps necessary to complete it, first thing you can do is hit the REST API to spin up this test environment, which can be automated via the REST API, which resides in the Zerto Virtual Manager. The next step would be to start the scan shortly after the recovered test VMs are online. And then finally, have the results emailed or saved somewhere. I mean, you can do it any number of ways. The main point here is that once you've got the manual procedure locked in, set your sights on automating it and gain that efficiency, that repeatability, and reduce the chances of human error in the future going forward or tests getting skipped. And the results we're going to get here at the end of the day can be seen here. We can say that through a sandbox environment and leveraging Zerto, you'll be able to quickly bring up copies of production for scanning. This practice, keyword practice, enables repeatability and you gain the privilege of frequency versus having to wait to do this once or twice a year. And by that time, all of our runbooks and test cases and steps are kind of out the window because everything else has been moving forward. Malicious actors don't take time off, and the business has a lot at stake. So don't give them a chance to catch you sleeping. Because you can test more often, you can be more proactive, and the IT security organization is going to be allowed to stay current on the evolving threat landscape as they find new ways to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from any incident. So in summary, Zerto continuously and non-disruptively replicates your workloads, giving you the ability to rapidly start that application aligned to any point in time, which is perfect for testing, operational, and disaster recovery use cases. Predefined resources such as compute, storage, network, along with IP reconfiguration, if required, to accommodate for or either a live for either a live or test operation, greatly reducing efforts and reducing the chance of human error at scale. You can leverage the test workflow, starting workloads in an isolated sandbox environment for any test case where you need to have production data assessed. Even if you want to put your auditors in that bubble and have them audit your system, you can do that. So creating a sandbox environment can be as simple as creating a port group on your hosts that is not connected to a backing physical NIC, and then assign that as your failover test. That way, when you run your failover test and these VMs come up in there, they will not be able to talk outside the host, and they will resort to a more of a broadcast type of conversation and still be able to find each other. Patch testing, vulnerability scanning, data analytics, forensics, and much more can be accomplished quickly and in a repeatable manner every time. Even if you wanted to test what ransomware does to your systems and how to recover from it, with Zerto, you can actually do that in your test environment. So here's a pro tip. Put an instance of your monitoring solution into your sandbox, and then leverage it to automate some of the validation of your recovery testing using those alerts and alarms and dashboards. If you were to take the steps to eliminate the guesswork and manual validation efforts, you can become a true master of disaster and also increase the efficiency of IT operations. All right. So if you'd like to take Zerto out for a test drive, we also have hands-on labs that are available on demand at any time and from any computer, completely free to you and without any additional setup. So to access those hands-on labs, it's as simple as going to myzerto.com, signing in and going to the training area. Or if you don't have an account, just go to myzerto.com and sign up for one, and you'll be able to get in and access that material. Right, so before we break, we have some time for some Q&A. Actually got through that a little quicker than I thought I would. So do we have any questions in the chat, or do you have anyone that wants to go live and ask a question?
Gene, I have a couple questions for you, this is Matt, that have come in the chat room and the question window. So are you ready?
Yep.
First one, after Windows patching is complete, is there an option to check if all the services have started successfully?
Not out of the box. You'd have to either write scripts to check those services, or with the monitoring solution inside that sandbox, it will be able to configure it like production or a copy of it from production. It will be able to see, especially if you're already monitoring them and you know what to look for. That will be the simple way to do it, is with that additional piece of your monitoring solution in there for your testing. Otherwise, it's someone's going in and they're looking at it to make sure the services are there. They're validating application access, and then the other option is to run a PostScript that can execute on that VM to verify certain services are up.
Great, thank you, sir. A couple more coming in here. Here they come, fast and furious. Do you offer a best practice checklist for customers who are currently using your product? And how are migration validations performed? Follow up to that is, we're moving to a new data center, so can Zerto help us not miss on any application?
Great, two questions. So first one is best practices. We do have a best practices document. Not so much a checklist, but it kind of goes through everything: configuration, usage. I'd like to actually dig more into that. But yeah, great question. We do have a baseline and best practices document out there in our tech documents section. Or if you're using the online help, there's a section in there, there's a link to that goes directly to the scale and benchmark guidelines, which is also our best practices. Second question, which was about migrating. Being able to test before migrating, understanding that the application and all its dependencies are there and ready to go before you cut over. Absolutely. In my own experience as a Zerto customer, that was the first use case we used it for, and that was to consolidate data centers into 5 data centers into one. Part of that process was running the move operation, and then you can either auto commit that move, or you can set it to manual or auto rollback. So you have options there. You can put a timer on the auto commit, so if no one goes and commits it, it automatically commits it to the site, which in some cases can be dangerous. We want more control. So what I often did and preferred to do was set it to manual, build it into part of that project plan for each application coming over as a last step, right? So we don't forget to do it. So you can validate everything. If you find out you're missing a server or you're missing a configuration somewhere in the destination, it's as easy as clicking the rollback button, which will shut down the systems in the recovery site or the destination site, bring them back up in production, and then you can try it again once you've identified what was missing and add it back in.
Gotcha. And Douglas and anybody else in the call for that matter, we're happy to follow up with a demo or more specific conversation. So just let us know, and we're absolutely happy to do it. We've got SE coverage globally, so if it's not Doug, I'm sorry, if it's not Gene, we've got other folks as well. Another question, some of our dev teams would love to automate this sandbox environment. What tools do you have for this request?
Good question. In terms of tools, well, if they're looking to get an idea of how to create some scripts to bring into that automation related to Zerto and workloads, we have a public-facing GitHub repository that people have been contributing to, and we also contribute to as well internally. There's a lot of sample scripts, actual scripts you can take and use for your own, make them your own, or even update and participate in the repository. Additionally, I'm actually in the process of doing some actual testing to kind of build, a basic reference architecture for this type of solution. So once you've identified everything that you need, that's when the work comes in to start figuring out how to automate it, right? So just document those steps, that process, go through it manually a couple of times so you know it inside and out, and you're accounting for everything, and then start building those scripts out in order. We get a lot of questions on how to do this, and a lot of it comes down to workflow, right? What is the workflow of this operation that you're trying to accomplish? So first, where I'd start first is build that workflow. And typically when I set out to go and test things and document things, before I put it on my blog, I'll also go through and create workflows to follow. And it's more of a guideline, right? Something to follow along with, a map, if you will. How you do each step is really up to you. But yeah, my blog also has some information up there for things I've done over time and done for customers who didn't have an area to test. So yeah, lots of options there.
Okay, a few more questions here. Can Zerto verify that all servers are at the same patch level and or are missing patches?
Not today. I don't think we do that. We don't inventory the systems themselves outside of indexing for LTR.
Okay. And just a quick follow-up to the prior one. Somebody asked a question, give you a chance. Shameless plug for your blog. Where would they find it?
Oh, right. So my blog is gene-torres.com. And then you can also find me on Twitter. Pretty active out there with the V community. It's at Eugene J. Torres. I can actually put the beginner slide back up, or the intro slide back up, because that's where it's at.
Okay. Question, next one here. Would it be feasible to use the hands-on lab environment to simulate a Zerto failover and failback simulation on a customer demo call? And could I do this in demo in 45 minutes or less?
Wait, one more time. Repeat that, please.
Yeah, they want to know if they can use the hands-on lab to demonstrate for a customer or prospect what a Zerto failover and failback looks like. And is it possible to do such a demo in 45 minutes or less?
Yes. So the hands-on labs are out there. Anyone can get access to it. And it's also starting to become more of a common occurrence internally for us and the SEs when we need a demo environment, if our lab's down or not functioning right, to spin up a hands-on lab before that meeting and then do the demo with that. So that's also another option there. Absolutely can do it in 45 minutes. Just try it out once and figure out what you want to show. Once you do that, then you can tailor make it the demo for your audience. Additionally, I am working on some pre-recorded demos that will be going onto YouTube. We do have also have them internally for the SEs to use. These are condensed versions of these demos because some of them can take a lot longer, especially when you're waiting for grass to grow, right, or meters to fill to 100%. We significantly cut those down, and those can actually be done in about 20 minutes. So those are also available. They will be on YouTube with narration shortly. I'm still working on creating the talk tracks for those.
Perfect. And also, in addition to our hands-on labs, if you want to go in and do a demo, which we do have a number of different topics in there to walk you through it, we also offer a free trial to use the Zerto product. And being that the Zerto product is a software-only solution, it's very easy to trial and POC. So that, if you go to Zerto.com or reach out to us, we can help you with that as well. Let's see, next question. Got some in here saying, thank you, Gene, nicely done, etc. But let me move to the questions.
Thanks.
Since Zerto is a software, I'm assuming this means Zerto itself would require updates at some time, right? How does that process typically work, and how would our organization be impacted by a lack of timely updates to Zerto if needed?
Okay, great. So Zerto puts out 2 major releases every year. It's typically a .0 and a .5 version. So that's once in the spring and then once in the fall. In between that, I don't remember the exact time frame, but we do release updates, major updates, which include new features, new enhancements, bug fixes, things like that. But then every so often between that, if there's something discovered, we'll provide a patch. And a lot of those are based on if support cases are coming in for specific things and to become something major, we'll provide a patch for that. The upgrade process itself for managing it is as simple as downloading the next version, latest one version. You can only have a 1 version difference, so you have to download that. Just install it on the ZVM. It's an in-place upgrade. You do it 1 site at a time, and it's all automated. So it takes about, what would you say, Matt, like 10 minutes for the upgrade, and then the VRAs will automatically upgrade afterwards.
Yes, that's roughly about right. And it's nice for anybody that hasn't done an upgrade in Zerto for a while. We do auto upgrade those VRAs, those data movers now, which can reduce the amount of time that an administrator would spend on it.
Yep. And then the caveat or the downside to not staying at least 1 version current or behind what's in GA is you can only, if you're operating in environments where, for example, you've got Zerto 7.5 on one end and 8.0, that will work. But when 8.5 gets released and you upgrade 8.0 to 8.5, you're gonna start to see some issues there, and a lot of that is due to new features that are not available or features that have been changed in the newer version that aren't the same in the original or the old 7.5 version. So you want to maintain at least a 1 version difference, and when I say 1 version, that's a .0 and a .5 are 2 major versions. So you can go to you can run with 7.0 and 7.5, 7.5 and 8.0, but if you fall too far behind, then it can become a multi-hop upgrade. And I've actually gone through and experienced this with several customers who started out with version 5 and then upgraded to version 7 shortly after it was released. So that was a 5.5, 6.0, 6.5, 7. So several step upgrade. That process itself, we could have gotten through in a matter of an hour or 2, but to be safe, we did it 1 version per day just to let things bake in. Yeah, it's very forgiving, but at the same time, if you fall too far behind, it can just spell out additional work for you to get caught up.
Yep, and your sentiments are being echoed by Michael Adams. Thank you. He said he's done several upgrades with Zerto, and it's easy and flawless, and he's had to do the multi-hop at time or two, and it takes a little longer, but painless overall. So Thank you, Michael, for that feedback. Gene, I'm going to jump off the questions and go to a couple of private chats. People ask questions that way. We will definitely get through the rest of them, but we still have a handful here. Can we do what you were showing today? Can that also be done in the cloud?
Yes. So the same way you would create an isolated network on premises, you can do the same thing out in the cloud and protect it with things like security groups, right? So you create these rules and groups that dictate what comes in and out of that network. I've done this in Azure. I've done it in AWS. In fact, I did write a white paper a couple of years ago on how to do this for AWS, and it was really targeted for the audience who was new to the cloud, right? And they wanted to know, how do I set AWS up from scratch just to test this and get an idea of how this works? So absolutely can be done in the cloud. In fact, if you don't want to risk putting it in your on-premises data center, you can definitely lock it down in the cloud and away from your production environment even further to do that testing, especially in the case of security testing, right? Detonating malware.
Yep.
But with anything like that, just be careful and make sure that everyone that needs to be involved is involved when you're setting those networks up.
Perfect. Okay. I've got a question here asking where our Zerto GitHub is. I'm going to drop that into the answer pane right now, but it is a GitHub/Zerto public. So that's one of those. And then question following up, we've got a couple here around APIs and scripting. What's the purpose of Postman?
Ooh. Well, how I've used Postman is to get familiar with our API, and that's not saying a lot because I am not a automation guru. We have another architect at Zerto. He actually covers the Eastern United States, who is heavy into the REST API. In fact, if you go into the GitHub, you'll see his name on there. His name is Wes Carroll. Very fluent with it. But for my purposes, I use Postman really to use it to test calls to the API. You can do things like save your credentials, your sessions and whatnot, and then run different scenarios to get different results. I wish I had more,
Gene,
but that's kind of what I've got.
Yeah, no, really, it's as from my experience as well. It's both for getting more familiar with, but also building out and testing APIs. So it's just giving you a framework to make life a little easier if you're not necessarily super adept like myself. I'm not super adept at APIs, so that's when I use Postman. Follow up to the API question: how extensive are the Zerto APIs in terms of being built out in Zerto?
So that's a good question. I actually got that asked a couple of weeks ago. So the Zerto core product itself started out not having or not being an API first solution. Our analytics is API first. So what we started out with was a lot more of the PowerShell commandlets. But today, every feature that we put out, we're also aligning with an API that comes along either with it or shortly after to be able to automate in those areas. Case in point is long-term retention. When we first released that, it wasn't very API rich, but today things have been added in to be able to do restores and things like that.
We've got the analytics covered through APIs as well, right?
Yep, absolutely. Analytics, I believe, has been API first when they built it, so it should be feature parity API wise versus what you see in the GUI.
Okay, just a couple more questions in here. Anybody else? Now's your chance to get them in. But next one, snapshots are for safety, but can you expound more on the statement you made about moving away from the need for snapshots? And also, just a quick follow-up to that, what is the current version of Zerto that's out there today?
Okay, so when I say snapshots, I'm referring specifically to VM snapshots in vCenter or vSphere. Storage snapshots, I get, are still a necessity for certain applications and as part of strategy in a lot of organizations. But really what Zerto is bringing to the table is we want to be non-invasive, non-disruptive to production. We don't want to impact performance. So we don't leverage the snapshots. The problem with the snapshots that I've seen over time is if they get forgotten a lot. I've seen backup software even leave them behind and only for us to find a performance problem down the road because of a snapshot. So it's still useful, but if you're talking about at scale, if you have 100 VMs to patch and they're all going at once, you don't want to be snapshotting 100 VMs at once, right? So it's just a lot more management. If you really wanted to kind of get that snapshot type of functionality or point in time with Zerto, that tag checkpoint, if you had 100 VMs in a protection group, you just go to the protection group and say add a tag checkpoint, give it a label, and click OK, and that's it. That's all you need to do. You don't have to go back and clean it up because it will naturally just age out and commit to the disk if you don't roll back.
Gotcha. Okay. And follow-up question that I can take here: what is the current or latest version of Zerto? Currently, we're on Zerto 8.0. We are probably in the 60-day range out from our next major release, which will be 8.5. Happy to, if you'd like, you can reach out, or we put it in message in here, and we can reach out and give you updates on those. Next question: why does Zerto run on Windows as opposed to Linux?
I would like to know as well. No. So it's been something that even I asked, and when I was a customer, I was using back in version 5. So I've asked about it. Several people have asked about it, both externally, internally, and we've seen the direction that people like VMware have gone with the Windows vCenter to an appliance. That is actually on our roadmap. It's currently being investigated. We would like to get to that point because it does reduce your requirement for Windows license. That said, the reason why it's still running on Windows is because it was built as a .NET application. We know .NET's available in Linux today, but it's currently being investigated.
And to be fair, the heavy lifters, the VRAs, are running on Linux today, right?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. One more question here: can we use Duo two-factor authentication for security purposes to lock down the web interface? How can we lock the security down for the Zerto environment?
Cool, great question. So Zerto actually relies on vCenter for logging in and permissions. So if you are using Duo today to gain access to the vCenter when you log into the console or to the vCenter interface, because Zerto goes through vCenter for authentication, and I've actually seen this in practice. As soon as you log into Zerto, you'll get a prompt on your device to, is this you, yes or no, or you just verify your identity and it lets you write in. So if that's the method you're using, that works just fine. Where it may be a challenge or might not even work is if you have to actually enter, if you have to enter a code somewhere, right, and you don't see it on the Zerto login screen. That will be where the challenge is. But for anything that gets sent to your device for you to authorize, it works just fine. And we actually discovered that with a customer in a POC, and I wasn't aware that they had that. So glad to see it worked the first time.
Nice. Also, just another shameless plug for Zerto. We have documentation out at MyZerto, and including in that documentation repository is a best practices guide around locking down and securing your Zerto environment. So in addition to being happy to talk to you about it on follow-up, we also have documentation out there for you. And Gene, I've got one more question. It came in through private chat, and that is what you've demonstrated for us. Could I do that in my production data center?
Yes. So Zerto has this unique feature called one-to-many, and what that gives you is the ability to protect the same workload in up to 3 different locations simultaneously. But one of those locations can actually be the same site, so you can self-replicate to the same site. And we do have customers doing this for very highly critical workloads that they may not necessarily want to run out of their DR data center or the cloud as their first option if there was something wrong. So they'll self-replicate and then bring it up locally if anything happens. So if you're doing that, and you're absolutely welcome to do it, just follow the best practices or recommendations around that isolated sandbox network for your failover test. When you're doing this self-replication, if you're going to the same storage, typically you're going to see, and this has been tested as well, because we do talk about operational recovery, deduplication. You're going to get 100% deduplication on the base disks. The only overhead is going to be for the journals. So depending on, if you're coming self-replicating to the production site, you can still do everything that we talked about in the production site with those applications. You can even enable it, maybe a couple of days before you're scheduled to run that test, so it's locally available, and you're also getting a copy out to your DR site at the same time. So you might not even have to touch the DR site. So how you want to do this is it's really flexible. You can do it locally in the production site, remotely in the DR site, or out in the cloud. However, whatever you want to do with it, if you have the resources for it, you can do it locally.
Great. And another question snuck in here. Can a Zerto environment be built out on its own VLAN, segregated that is, so it is not on the production VLAN?
Yes, you can. I've actually done that. ZVMs were built on like management networks or on their own network, and they can actually just get firewall rules to talk to the vCenter and whatnot. The VRAs themselves, you can think of them, you can put them on their own network, so they can send the replication traffic between only themselves, and it doesn't bleed out of the network. Kind of, configure it kind of like that iSCSI or the vMotion network, where it's only allowed to talk to itself, right? Kind of isolated to that effect. But yes, you can definitely do that. Or if you have a specific WAN connection you want to use that's not shared and outside of production use, you can also use the routing configuration in Zerto and the site settings to set up your routes to go the proper direction.
Okay. And if there's no additional questions, we got a good one from Roger here to kind of wrap us up, and that is this session being recorded? And if so, can I get a copy of it to share with my internal teams? And there'll be yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Yep. This session is being recorded and will be available for replay. And then if anyone's interested in the slide deck as well, we can make that available.
And a comment here, excellent webinar. Lots of questions, and not sure we're using Zerto to our full capabilities. I've got you down here, Douglas, and we'll make sure that somebody from Zerto reaches out to you. Here come a couple more sneaking in. Can I restore files and folders from the backup that's, say, a couple weeks old?
Yes.
So okay.
Yeah, we've got journal file level recovery. That would be the first place I'd look if you're protecting if you're setting a journal that's longer than 2 weeks. It's very fast. Straight out of the journal, you can recover files down to the second and folders, as well as from the backup. So from backups, we can also recover VMs, entire applications, or files.
So those backups, those LTR copies, Gene, on follow-up, how long can those be kept for?
So LTR, I remember I asked that question, and someone threw out a number like, if you want to protect data for 1,500 years, you can put 1,500 years in there. It's really unlimited. Just depends on storage.
Okay, and then this one, what have you seen in Zerto that getting compromised? How do you protect Zerto?
Oh, good question. So there are a couple of best practices that kind of came out from both internal as well as some of our customers have brought this to us. A couple of the things they're doing with their Zerto virtual managers and Zerto cloud appliances, those are the ones that run out in Azure and AWS, is one, they're not putting it on the domain. They're keeping it off, so the potential for any kind of ransomware through network share doesn't reach it. Two, don't share any folders off that system and connect it to your laptop or your desktop. And then just make sure it's all, it's always up to date. We do have the ability on premises to create an quote unquote HA pair of ZVMs. And that was really designed to accommodate for being able to patch the Zerto virtual manager systems, those Windows systems, in an active passive manner. So what you would do is, if you set it up that way, it does require an external SQL Server and Windows clustering services. But if you set it up that way, Zerto will be running on the primary. What you can do is update the secondary and then do a failover to it, and then upgrade the primary, the former primary. So that's one way to do it, to keep it up to date and patched. But to lock it down, one other thing that comes to mind is the segregation. So the network segregation with rules allow, that specifically say who can get access to this. You can also go as far as creating a specific jump box that only has access to Zerto in all your sites. So you have to go through that jump box, and you're not directly going to it. Otherwise, you can still access it from any HTML5 browser anywhere.
Okay. Another request for not necessarily the recorded preso, but the slides themselves. Is that going to be available?
Yep, we can make that available. If you want to take a note, Matt, of who asked that, or who's asking for the slide deck,
yep.
we can do that. You can send it to him.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then follow up to what you were just talking about. How do I get help in building out a lockdown environment?
Ooh, okay. So building out a lockdown environment, first thing I would do is check internally with your team to see if any your network team especially, if they can do that for you. Second option is, because with Zerto we are a channel only, so we work with a lot of resellers and consulting partners to that effect. If you do have a partner that you love working with, or you always work with, you can reach out to them and also see if they've got the resources to be able to help you build that and plan that network out. But for what I mean, even the local Zerto team will be able to give you some ideas on how to accomplish that in your environment. You can reach out to me on Twitter or my website, and we can start a conversation there, and I can kind of help you out as well.
Gene, what's your sorry, here's a follow-up question, security related. So if Zerto is not on the domain, will that help to protect against a ransomware attack?
Yep. Yeah, especially if it's a network if it's a network share related one.
Okay. All right. Any more questions, folks? I've noticed in some of you here in the windows have asked for us to reach out directly, or have asked for some specific information. And to Gene's comment a few minutes ago, we're making note of that, and we'll make sure that you are contacted accordingly. And Gene, I think that wraps up Q&A, unless there's anybody else going once, going twice. I'll leave the Q&A session open here for a few more minutes. So if when we're done, we can certainly answering those. But at the top of the hour, we'll go ahead, which I guess is just about now. We'll go ahead and shut it down. Go ahead, Gene.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you're all staying safe, and have a great rest of your week. Reach out to us via Twitter, our website, our forums, and let us know if you have any questions, or even your local account team if you've already met them. Again, have a good day, and thank you very much.